Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. Great. So we also have a few friends who have joined on YouTube. If you joined on YouTube, LinkedIn, or any other place, let me just share the link to the Zoom. You can directly join in here. Okay, so thank you. Great. Okay, so let's begin. So what we are going to cover here is, let me first share my screen. Okay, so how many of you have attended the recent hackathon that was taken by Shubham sir? Type me in the chat box. Yes, that's great. Thanks, Rahul. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we are going to cover from module 1 of the blockchain hackathon. So now you can reference it from the first module that was actually explained originally by Professor Pandurangan. So how many of you have gone through the module that was done by Professor Pandurangan? Type me in the chat box. Yes, Manish. By raising hand, you're saying yes, you finished it. Okay, so this is going to be a revision hackathon. So I will encourage you to have, if you have any questions, you can just put, right? So on the chat itself. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, so now here, yeah, it is the module 1. Yes, Subrata. Now what we are going to do is we'll understand the evolution of blockchain. Before that, a little history. So the agenda will cover the origin of cryptocurrencies and blockchain. But to understand that, we'll understand what triggered it, which will be the 2008 financial crisis. We'll understand a little about that, and we'll also understand a little about the origin and the evolution of money, right? Okay, so let's begin. So this is evolution of money in just one screen for you to have an understanding. So first it started with barter, which was exchange of physical goods. Then it was gold, right? So you might have heard about the gold coins. Then we came across metal coins, right? Then the fiat currency or the paper money, then the digital currency, then cryptocurrency, right? So we'll understand a little of these in detail, right? So how many of you understood, like, this is the agenda? The agenda is clear for the people. Type C in the chat box. Great. Thank you so much, Manish. Yeah, great. So now what is barter system? It's very simple. Now barter is nothing but exchange, right? So you give something, you get something, right? It is a commodity to commodity exchange. So traditionally, we are talking about how traditional 5,000, 6,000 BC. That was the early, early time where agriculture was predominantly the only thing, right? Hunting and agriculture. So that point, people were exchanging what they made. Like, for example, I do dairy products and all. If somebody is doing something like which is wheat or rice, so you do an exchange, right? So what happened as we continue along is there was no commonly agreed value for these goods, right? So everybody valued their own goods differently, and even if you travel from city to city, the value also changes, right? So now if we are talking about coastal areas, the abundance or availability of a few food or a few items is more, so the perceived value would be less. So there was a challenge here, right? So there was a challenge in this barter system. So we came up with better system. So what were the challenges here? Now you could not find the right buyer for goods within the time. For example, if you are producing sugarcane, and you would want somebody to consume it as early as possible, or else it will get dehydrated, right? I mean, it will get dried out. So you need someone who's in need of that within the same time and would value it, equally, right? The value that you want to give. But that is a challenge. It does not happen always, right? And fractionalization was also not possible. Fractionalization meaning, for example, I need only, I have something for exchange, but the value that is given by the other person, you cannot give it. Like, for example, uh, somebody cannot give me half a cattle or half goat, right? If I give them some wheat, right? So that is also a problem. Logistics is definitely a challenge. You cannot easily carry, and you cannot, for exchange, you cannot hold and have lots of wheat bags with you, or always have your cattle with you, goats and all those things. So it is always a very big challenge, right? So anyway, as we evolved, right, when we came into like 1000 BC or something, so this continued for very long, right? Then people understood that this is not scalable for larger ecosystems. People started doing, place to place trade. People were going out, and it was not very much possible to carry all these things together. So that was the challenge that people have had, right? So how many of you understood the challenges of the barter? Because it's a very simple concept. So type U for understand, right? If you understood the concept of the barter, type U in the chat box. Great. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rahul. Thank you, Manish. That's great. Okay. So now the currency system. Now what happened is later on people understood there should be something where we can have a common value, right? It is somebody saying, I have, this is more valued, this is less valued. We have something that has a common value, and that was the currency. So now the idea of currency is something that you use for, exchange, right? So between commodities, there came in currency. You get a commodity, and for that it costs you something, and with that you buy something else, right? So there was economic store of value, because now each of whatever the currency was, for example, early days the currency was shells, right? So there was also a time where shells were being exchanged, right? So it was considered to be having some value, like this kinds of shells will have so much value, this kinds of metal will have so much value. So there was some economic store of value, right? So now these were fungible. Now you would ask, what is fungible? We'll first understand what is fungible and non-fungible, right? So now fungible means whatever I have and whatever you have, the value is same, right? So my 10 rupees is same as your 10 rupees, right? So this is fungible. Now, what is semi-fungible? It is, for example, we both have tickets to a movie, let's say Avatar. Now, what happens is the first row seat values and the last row seat values, or the comfort, would be different, right? So maybe the same concert would have, they are fungible, but they're not equally in both values, right? Non-fungible means whatever I have and whatever you have, both have unique value for themselves, right? They have something unique within them. So I hope the fungible portion of it is clear to everyone. So is the fungible portion clear to everyone? Type C in the chat box. So whatever I have, whatever you have will have the same value, right? Okay, thank you. Correct. Yes, Prasad. So now this, the fungibility was there to this particular system. But the challenge was this was all centralized as in, like, when we are talking about gold, when gold came in, like, what happened is the value of that was being, monitored and held by, given by a central authority, which is mostly the kingdom or the place that they normally live in, right? Yes, Prasad, you have a question? Correct. So that is what we said, Prasad. Plus, fungible is having same value, right? So, for example, if you, Prasad sir has a question, it says, like, is fungible meaning different values? No. Whatever I have, whatever you have, has the same value, right? So that is what we said. Great. Now, so the challenges were centralization, because a government or a king has to, somebody has to monitor this. That was the challenge with the currency system. Okay. But later on, what happened, the metals also, you had to be carrying them. So that also was a challenge. Like, the logistical challenge was always there. And in gold also, it is very difficult to fractionalize. For example, if you want something of very little value, like you wanted just pulses, but you cannot actually have lesser value of gold. Like, the fractionalization also was a challenge which came in, like, you had cents and all those things. Then the metals came, right? So after gold, then the metals came in, right? So where they had lesser value for lesser items. But these were who was the person who was deciding? There was some central authority that was deciding what coin had what value, what metal had what value, right? For 5 cents of this, for 5 coins of this, what is possible to buy. So that is how the currency had the challenges always. The potential for misuse was also there, right? Because currency, when you have, it is always possible because you cannot track how it is being used, right? So somebody could use for buying something, that is harmful for somebody else. So that is always possible. So that potential for misuse is always there. Now, then came in fiat currencies. So the challenge with gold was it was not very easily carryable. You cannot carry a bag of golds and travel always, right? So now fiat currency came in. Now here, so I guess this portion of the currencies, the gold currencies is understood. Gold and metal is understood by everyone. Type U in the chat box if you understood this portion of it. Yes, thank you so much. Great. So now the fiat currencies. Now, what happened here? The same, whatever properties the gold had, the same was there, but this was more of like a paper kind of a thing, right? So metal had an intrinsic value, its own value, like it weighs something, even it had some particular value. But fiat currencies do not have a value. But you would believe the person who is authorizing it, like if he says this has a value of 10 rupees, you have to trust it, right? So this is what came in with fiat currencies. Now, if you see on any of your notes, on your 200 rupees note or 10 rupees note, you can see that there is a statement which says, and I promise to pay the bearer, right? So now what happened? What means that the paper currency is a promise. So it does not have its own value. For example, now a 2000 rupees note or a 10 rupees note, still a note. The difference in value is a perception. The value of it is a perception that this is 2000. But the intrinsic value is written on it that this is 2000 rupees and I promise the bearer the value of it, right? So now this is the fiat currencies. Earlier, what used to happen is, in the early days, the whatever currency was there, it was asset backed. For example, if a kingdom or a country had so much gold in store, then they would print that much of currency alone only, right? So that was asset backed. Slowly, what happened is this asset backing was gone, right? So which means governments were free to print the amount of money that they need, right? For example, we'll discuss about this in the further slides. If, for example, there is now we want to control the economic situation. For example, we want somebody to make it more affordable. The economic whatever situation is there, we want more flow of money into the economy, then you print more. But this is not asset backed. What actually happened is you decrease the value of the currency by printing more. So this is what we mean by an asset. It is the currency being not tangible, right? It's not asset backed. Yes. So what we'll do is we put the queries towards the end, so that will make it easier. Yes, Manish, I think I'll be able to help you towards the end of this particular session, right? If it is related to certification also, yeah, we'll be able to help you. So the challenge with the fiat currency is lack of asset backing, right? And then came in digital currency, digital fiat currency. It is still the same currency, but in an electronic form, right? So the same properties remain, but now you have the currency prone to cyber attacks, right? You can now you might have heard in the initial days you had heard that many cyber attacks are happening, accounts are getting hacked, and amounts are being taken. So that is always there. And the challenges with the digital currency is also the fiat currency, which is an electronic currency, is still there. The asset backing is still not there. Okay. So now we'll understand a little about what was the 2008 financial crisis, right? So now we have understood the first agenda portion, which is the evolution of currencies and the challenges with that. Now we are talking about the financial crisis. The problem which caused the trigger was this, right? The portion of subprime customers. Now, what is subprime customers? Basically, now banks lend money to people, right? So people who have, a very good, credit score, those are the prime customers, right? Now, people who have a riskier credit score, those people are the subprime customers, right? So banks are very cautious when they are giving loans or lending money to people, right? So what happened in 2008, just before 2008 financial crisis, is more money, more loans were given to the subprime customers who were riskier people. Like, it is not, their credit scores were not that good, right? So now this increased from 1.5% to 18%, which is like more than 10x. So that is, you can understand the proportion of the problem, right? So now the other problem was, now these riskier assets were bundled with low risk assets, and those were sold. Like, people do not directly buy the riskier assets. So the people, bonds were made and they were bundled, like the low risk assets and high risk assets were bundled together and sold, right? So we'll understand what happened to these bonds also. That'll be in our next slides. We'll understand how the problem was caused. Now, how loans work is the Fed. Here is the Federal Reserve of US, right? So which is an analogous to our RBI, right? So the Federal Reserve gives money to banks at a particular interest rate, and then banks add their own margin. For example, now Fed's interest rate was 6%, and the bank was giving it at 9%. Now the bank interest rates were 3% higher than the Fed rates. Okay. Now banks offered loans only to prime or low risk customers. The interest rate was standard and collected on a periodic basis. So this was when the actual piece was there, right? So everything was happening as per the plan. So how many have understood the before crisis scenario here? Right? Type U in the chat box. So how Fed used to give loans to banks, the commercial banks, and how banks used to give loans to the low risk customers. Yes, thank you, Jivan. Thanks, Prasad. Thank you. So now this was before crisis. So what actually triggered the crisis? Now, the Federal Reserve wanted to, boost. It actually hoped that the economic growth, the spend of the people, will be increased when they'll be able to give loans at a lower interest rate, so that there is more inflow. And the other question, this was one of the things that was hoped by the Federal Reserve. The other thing was the 2000 to 2003 internet bubble that caused a lot of unemployment. Many people lost their jobs. So, and they were all unemployed, and they were looking for, turning towards the banks for loans. So to boost the economy, the Federal Reserve thought to give the loans at a lesser interest rate to the commercial banks. So now how did this happen is the initial interest rates were, if they were 6.75, year after year, in a few years, it came to 1.75. So that was low interest. People were going and getting loans like crazy, right? So that caused this bubble. Like, the spiral started from there. And at one point, the bubble would burst, right? So we'll understand the chain of events here, right? How many of you understood the trigger, right? How this got triggered? Type U in the chat, right? Great. So now the chain of events. Now, when the Fed decreased the interest rates, banks started loaning to subprime customers also because they wanted more customer volume, right? So they started giving it at the customer. Now, if you understand about this, in India, RBI does something similar, which is called the repo rate. Like if RBI gives the loans to commercial banks, this is called the repo rate. And this is an instrument that RBI or in US Federal Reserve can use to control the flow of the money in the system, right? So, but then before 2008, this is what happened, right? So, and what happened now? If you look at a little chain of events, the Fed has decreased the interest rates. Banks started loaning to subprime customers also, right? So what the intent was to increase the customer volume and thereby maintain the margin, right? So they'll also be making their own profit. Now here, another thing that happened was ballooning was happening. So now what is ballooning is in the early days of your loan, you can begin by paying very less. And as time passes, you pay more. So to boost the economy and make it accessible for people to they make the loans affordable initially, you have to pay very less at the beginning, right? So this was happening. Now what happened? The access to money was there in the system for many people, and this caused demand for houses increased, right? So people understood, right? Even US, the dreams are for people to own houses, right? So the demand for houses increased due to easy loans, because now houses are like the assets, like people can mortgage it, right? Against the house. So access to money was there, and houses were now, the easy loans were possible. So demand for houses increased, and the house prices also soared, like that also increased. So now this is also called the housing bubble, right? So what happened is people started buying houses on loans, like very, in a very haphazard way. A lot of buying was happening, right? So how many of you understood till now? Type U in the chat. Yes, okay. So now what banks did, banks let the same high risk customers borrow more money based on new revised value. Right? So basically, even for example, if the asset was there, even the customers were able to buy or lend more money also, right? And what happened is people happened to buy 2 to 3 houses. They started owning 2 to 3 houses, and that was happening. So people were buying houses, everything was happening. And then what happened a little later, the mortgage-based securities were created, which is nothing but the bonds that we were talking about. So what happens is the housing, the whole of the properties, all of these also, people could invest in them in terms of securities or bonds. So these were created and to attract investment from other countries also, other nations, other individuals also. Even people who had money, they could invest in this housing ecosystem by purchasing the mortgage-based securities, right? So these were like bonds. People thought that because this is going to rise and people will eventually start paying the house loans, right? So many people, even many other countries, started buying these MBS, okay? And what happened after that? So the easy buyer base was created even for the repossessed houses. So later on, what happened is the prices started increasing because the the scarcity of the land or property or houses is always there. So they slowly found out that there was no one to buy these houses due to extremely high prices. Extremely, like, slowly people, these houses were all empty, vacant. There was no people buying them, right? So this is where the bubble started bursting, right? People were buying the houses, right? People were taking to buy the houses, but the end houses, whatever were there, were not being bought by other people so that they can repay the loan because the prices went very high. So now what happened? No buyers were coming. These loans were not getting paid. So if somebody is not buying the house, the person who took the loan was not able to pay the bank. The EMIs were getting defaulted. Right? Slowly, they got defaulted. Initially, they ignored thinking that it is going to recover. People are going to pay back. But it never happened. The whole of the market crashed. The whole people whoever bought, they were not able to pay. Now, if other people were coming to banks and asking for money, they did not have to give out, right? Because it was already lended and to people who were, the high risk people, but even the prime customers, they were not able to get the money. So this caused an, economic stagnancy. And then the bubble burst, and this had global ripple effects. 2008 financial crisis is a very popular thing, and there were a lot of changes that were done later on. But this was like an epic failure, and this failure happened by one system, which was starting from the Federal Reserve. So now, after that, the US government bails out a few banks, though they went bankrupt, bails out a few banks, and that ends this particular whole scenario, right? So this is how the financial crisis happened. But now, who are the people who got who were at loss, right? The other countries were at loss. The people who lost their jobs, people who took the loans, the banks, everybody was at loss. Now, why this happened? Because the Federal Reserve could tweak the value of the currency, right? So now that is the challenge that triggered this whole of it, like, the interest rates and everything. So the centralization, the one wrong decision of such a big entity could cause a ripple effect on the whole ecosystem, the whole economy. So that is what caused. Now the centralization became a big challenge, right? So the central control of currency, the single point control, and single point of failure, right? And the other double spending portion is, like, even if it's a digital currency, let's understand if it's a digital currency also, people were spending more than one's capacity, and fraudulent transactions were also happening, right? That is also one challenge that was there with this system, financial system, right? And there was a lot of you can imagine that was a very grave situation, right? So then that triggered the popularization of the concept of Bitcoin, right? So we'll go through that. But how many of you understood the financial crisis, the whole of the financial crisis? Type U in the chat box. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, Praveen. Thank you, Prasad. Okay, so now this brings us to the origin of cryptocurrencies. We have traveled a lot from the barter system to centrally owned, centrally managed currencies to now cryptocurrencies. So a decentralized system which would not be controlled by anyone. And in 2008, what happened is a group or an individual named Satoshi Nakamoto published this white paper on Bitcoin. So now we do not know this person or group is anonymous, because this could be a big move against the financial system, which was built from so many years. So they wish to stay anonymous, right? So it makes total sense. right? Or else that would be a very big challenge for them, right? So now this started getting implemented from Jan 2009, and the first transaction that they had, that message in the block contained a message which was the times 3rd Jan 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks, which means that this tells us the aggression of the person or the group or the person Satoshi Nakamoto, which was related to the financial crisis. So many times historically, it is that is why it related the origin of Bitcoin to the financial crisis, because that had a very close relation. Okay, so let us understand a little bit more about it, right? So now in Bitcoin, how these challenges are being solved is there is no intermediary involved between transactions. So Prasad, your question is where was it published? So white papers are published, like whenever some research is done, that is published across it. This can be found online also. Yeah, so now publisher published under a name. So the question is, how was it anonymous, right? So now, for example, even people write anonymous books, they don't write it in their real name. So that is how that becomes anonymous. We do not know who is Satoshi Nakamoto, right? So that is how it becomes anonymous, right? So that's how it works. So now here the double spending issue is resolved. For example, I make a transaction to someone. If I make a transaction with Praveen or Praveen makes a transaction to Prasad, what happens here is all of the transactions are on record on all the systems on the block. And for example, we are all on the block. What happens is whenever some transaction is happening, it is registered everywhere. So what happens is even later, if I change something, the system will immediately identify that as a wrong or a double spent or a misuse of that particular transaction. So that will be immediately identified. So there was a lot of transparency that was brought in. A self-regulated system guided by its protocol. Now we'll learn more about the protocol in our next sessions, but the system was self-regulated. And the immutable append-only ledger distributed across all nodes of the Bitcoin network. So the point that was told is the same. There was one common ledger which was distributed across all the nodes, right? Immutable, it is difficult to make change. If you make change also, it is easily identified, right? There is no single point of failure because it is distributed. It's not centralized. Correct. So the participants can choose to mine, observe, and transact. For example, if I become a node, if I become a blockchain node, I need not have to transact or mine. I can just stay as an observer, right? So but what you are doing is you are supporting the blockchain ecosystem by becoming a node, so that a copy of all of the transactions, as portion of the transactions, are stored with you as well, right? So this was a solution that was firstly brought for the financial systems, the financial transactions, all those systems. But then the technology that this was built on, the blockchain, then the power of that was understood by many other people. And this kind of transparency could be brought, this kind of a system could be brought into many other areas of different industries as well. Right? So that was understood, but this is the beginning of it, right? So now Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency, and blockchain are different. The Bitcoin or the cryptocurrency is an application of blockchain. So it is built over blockchain, right? So which is the overall technology. We'll learn about that also. So how many people have understood the properties of the Bitcoin? Right? Type U in the chat box. Yes. Thank you so much, Shweta. Thank you so much, Prasad. Thank you so much. So blockchain having only one ledger globally. Yes. I mean, theoretically speaking, that is the only one ledger. But it does not mean that each node will have the full, it could have one portion of that particular access to the ledger, and the same copy is also available elsewhere, right? So it is distributed. Though it is one single ledger, it is distributed all across, right? Yes, thank you, Nilesh. I hope that answers. Right, great. Now, okay, a little more about it. What is this Bitcoin? So how is it different from others? This is a cryptographic key-based ownership. For example, whenever you transact on even on Bitcoin, or if you use any other wallet also, every transaction or all the ownership is a key-based. Cryptographic is, we'll understand a little more about cryptography and how do we encrypt also, but this is a cryptographic key-based ownership, right? So it is encrypted. Now, ownership of funds are proven by using digital signature, right? So it is not easy to replicate the same digital signature. So if I have to see the funds, if I want the funds to be moved, me or the person who has my digital signature can only do it. So that the digital signature becomes something that person has to closely guard, right? Transactions are irrefutable, right? They are not easily, you cannot tweak it, you cannot change it, right? So that is what we are meaning here, right? So this covers a little about the origin of Bitcoin. So we are well in time. Correct. So let us go for questions. We have a little time left, 10 minutes. Okay. Yes, Praveen. Praveen asks how different currencies are placed in blockchain. Right. So I give you a common example. So to understand, to iterate. Now in 2008, back then, the system, the white paper research system was brought out, and now these crypto tokens, different currencies that you're talking about, crypto tokens. Now Bitcoin is the most popular and the foremost crypto token, right? So by currency, I hope you're meaning the token, right? So there are many other people who have also made using the blockchain. So now just imagine people who have understood the blockchain. In 2009, it was made. A lot of education, a lot of research was also done later on. So people could use the understanding of that and create their own crypto tokens. So that is how these were done and published. Yes. So we have other questions. So let me just take up. Supposing one buys Bitcoins, how can one convert Bitcoins to regular currency like INR or USD? So basically, how the cross question is, how would you buy Bitcoins? Right? You would buy Bitcoins using your current currency, right? So basically, now because Bitcoin, see, we are not talking about Bitcoin specifically, right? We are talking about blockchain. But to answer your question, how can one convert between Bitcoins? There are a lot of, everything has a value. Now this is like like you trade online. You can every day the value is getting fluctuated, right? So when there were lesser number of nodes, lesser people who are into this concept and invested into this concept, the value was lesser. But as and when more people came in, more finance was put in, like people were investing into it. So this is also backed by the market. There are a lot of factors like any other currency. This is backed by the market, the consistencies. So that is one thing that we have to be very careful. The value of any particular crypto coin or any particular currency is based upon the exchange or the marketplace. Right. So I hope that answered the question. Great. So Shiv understood the concept and today's module 1. So I would request you to, if you have any questions, you can put it on the chat. And I request you to go through the module 1 that was explained by Professor Pandurangan sir. This will be in your LMS. Go ahead And if you've already done it, if you've already taken the quiz, that's well and good. And if at all you've not done, it would be today's session was referenced from that. So you will, if you now go through it, it will be easy for you to understand, right? And Moni sir, because you've finished the course, what you need to do is you can just actually give your email ID to us. We will be enabling Ensign quiz for you. Once you finish that quiz, the certification process gets initiated. Right. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. I would request you to also send it here, though I'm making a note of it. Okay. So you've given 2 email IDs. Which one? The second one. Okay. So we'll check and give that. Yeah, Prasad said one can buy Bitcoins online, right? Similarly, one can sell Bitcoins. Yes. So there are exchanges through which you can buy Bitcoins and purchase Bitcoins. And yes, you can do it on. Correct. So the difference between token and cryptocurrency, basically, this is a deeper concept that we'll also cover later, but to give you an understanding, both are a little similar. Like, crypto token is the unit that we normally talk about. So it is interchangeably used. Correct. So I hope we've had answered all the questions till now. That's great. Okay, so if any questions, you can drop in your questions, and please do go through all the sessions. And the coming Friday, you will have another hackathon. If there's any change, you will get the message via email, right? It would be at 4 Friday, right? And a follow-up revision hackathon will be again next Monday, right? So see you everyone. Thanks for joining in. So hope you have taken value from today's session. The intent of these hackathons is to assist you to go through the course and complete it, right? So I would request you to go through the module 2 before the next hackathon, so that you'll have a better understanding and you can have better questions to ask, right? And the next hackathon, thank you so much, Priyanka. Thank you, Prasad sir. Okay, so you have a question, understood. So now to understand the logistics of the hackathons, the next hackathon we will be doing would not be on the second module, it will be on the third module. So it requires you to finish the module 2 so that you can understand the next hackathon. So it is very much helpful for you to also independently go and complete the module 2. Okay. Next hackathons will cover subsequent modules. Yes, I think I answered your question, Prasad. This will cover the alternate module. So we are going 1, 3, 5, then we'll go to 4. So what happens is if we go in the sequence, we'd be, there will be nothing much for the attendees or by themselves to do, right? So I would request you to first go through the module in the sequence, right? So consider Professor Pandurangan's sessions to be the actual curriculum, and consider these are there to assist you. Right. So if you have any question, you can always write to and when you write to this particular email ID, just mention it as. So what happens is we'll understand, these questions are technical questions or post-related questions, so that will direct it to the right persons. These will be answered in the next hackathon, or you can directly ask in the next hackathon itself, or we'll answer it via the email itself. Okay, Tarik, I think we have given you the Telegram link. So if you've not received this over email, what I would suggest is you can just send it across here. Let me also share it across. So I think most of the questions right now are related to the course and the logistics of it. Great. So I would conclude this session, the topic as I'll conclude the topic. Then we'll take the questions offline. Just give me a second. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. So I will request you to go through your LMS, and if you have any queries, write to J at Pixeltest.